Teachers have read it. What is the funniest thing that has happened in your classroom to a student that, as a teacher, you were not allowed to laugh at? Teacher hears a girl's phone vibrating in her purse and says, "I hope that is a phone." Teacher walks another 2 steps and realizes what she just said. Class erupts in laughter. I taught daycare for 4 years. My favorite was when a 4-year-old would curse. It usually went like this. "It, Jack said. It, Ems. Fikvik. They said it." "Who said it?" "My dad says you can't say it. My dad says it all the time." Not a teacher, but this story of shame has been burnt into my mind, although it took me a few years to appreciate it. When I was in grade 1, I was some seriously hot it. I knew my times tables up to 12. Was picked first for dodgeball and everyone wanted to trade their lunch with me. I had it going on. Now, one day, we're all assigned to write a small story to share with everyone at the end of the day. Most kids haul out a sheet of loose leaf and a pencil. One kid's in the back eating glue. But me? I've decided to write a monster of an epic tale, the likes of which Tolkien himself would be proud. I haul out not 1, but 4 sheets of loose leaf. But then I had an even better idea. If I fold the sheets in half twice, I can snip the top edge and have an 8-page book. That Methodica is gonna have a picture on the cover with my name on it as the author. Oh yeah, I was gonna be making it rain smiley stickers. So I labor away creating a fantastic novella about 3 little ducks. I've got a story, a villain, and a picture on every page. And did the fact that I couldn't find my yellow crayon stop me? Hell no. I updated my working title to 3 naked ducks and colored them peach. I turn in my book and go crack a juice box with my buddy Simon. Finally, at the end of the day my teacher, Mrs. Davis, calls me to the front of the room to privately discuss my masterpiece. "Yes, I think this is it, kid. You're moving up to the big leagues," and practically skip to the front of the room. Mrs. Davis looks me right in the eye, face flushed and strained, with tears in her eyes, and says, "Duck is spelled with a U, not an I." I confiscated a balloon from a kid one day because he was making that really loud squeaky noise with it. 2 minutes later I looked over and he had another balloon. A blue one this time. Took that one too. Next time I turned my head he pulled out another one. Red. Took it. This went on for another 2 minutes or so, which counted another 3 balloons. I finally asked him how much longer this was going to go on, to which he just kinda shrugged his shoulders. "Well, how many more balloons do you have?" I asked him. "I dunno. Couple," he said, as he opened his backpack. His backpack was literally full of balloons. There were at least a couple hundred in there. No books, no pencils, no spare room for anything else, save for the 5 or 6 balloons that I had confiscated a few minutes prior. There were 4 or 5 pockets on the bag that I asked him to empty, which were all filled with balloons as well. All in all, the kid was very dedicated to the gag. So I told him that if he promised to do the same thing to another particular teacher, he could get them back at the end of the class. Edit, thanks for the gold. Itches. My friend's wife is a high school music teacher, and she told me a story. She went into class and was getting set up when she sees this kid take his trombone and place it between his legs and slid the slide out, going, "Look, I got a tromboner." She said it was very difficult to discipline him while not laughing her ass off. My friend was subbing in a high school class. The teacher had left some work and the kids all had these sheets they had to fill out. One kid, let's call him Jimmy, who was overweight, was bringing his filled out sheet to the teacher's desk when another female student, think Mean Girls, asked out loud, "Jimmy, why are you so fat?" Before my friend could say something, Jimmy replied with, "You want to know why I'm so fat? Because every time I duck your mother, she gives me a cookie." My friend had to leave the room so as not to laugh. Everybody lost it and apparently the girl even apologized because Jimmy's comeback was too good. When reading Hamlet with the class, after Ophelia's line about Hamlet, "To speak of Hirosasa comes before me," a kid said, "Hamlet, get it together, man." I cracked up. The other kids didn't get it, luckily. I teach undergrad courses. I caught a student that had plagiarized a few paragraphs in one of her papers. I asked her to stay after lecture and sat her down, asking if she had plagiarized her paper. Her eyes got huge. She welled up and then she said, "I did. I'm so sorry. I was so tired and had so much work and my roommate told me to do it and said you would never find out." Then with the most serious expression she whispered, "And I know now she's the devil." I did not laugh even though I really wanted to. I teach preschool, so there are a lot of instances in which I'm not allowed to laugh but really want to, can't help it sometimes. Farting is probably the most common, but two particular stories stick out in my head. This year, we were talking about our families. Dads were a difficult subject of discussion last year because I taught in a neighborhood in which most students didn't have dads, or if they did, they were in jail. Students would shout out things like, "My dad sells drugs," or "My dad yells at my mom," in this oddly excited voice because they didn't have filters yet and were just happy to have a chance to share. This year, most of my students have more traditional families. The other day, one of them shouted out, "My dad snores when he sleeps," and another student responded with, "My dad sleeps naked." Hilarious. Now, I can't look at that dad without blushing. Last year, my classroom carpets that had the alphabet border around the edges. One of my students, Demetrius, liked to sit on the letter D because it was the first letter of his name. One day, Zaria sits on the letter D. Demetrius gets in her face and yells, "Zaria, get off my D. I lost it." From when I was teaching preschool, "You have blue eyes like my mommy, but her tatas are huge." Oh, thanks, kid. My friend is a teacher and he has told me several stories, but two from the same student always make me laugh. Now to preface this stories, the student in question is somewhat backwards and country, kinda pudgy with a bad haircut and glasses. Story 1. My friend is standing at the front of the room as class is about to begin. The student comes barging in the room and basically yells at my friend, "Mr. G, I don't need your questions. I just need answers. Can I go to the bathroom?" My friend was somewhat stunned. Then as he was holding back laughter, he said sure. Story 2. My friend is walking down the hallway headed to his classroom as the bell has just rung. The hallway is basically empty, except for the aforementioned bathroom student. He's standing at his locker with his backpack right in front of it. My friend walks over and says to the student, "Hey, you need to get to class," to which the kid responds, "I'm headed there in a second Mr. Capital G." My friend sees him messing with his backpack and being secretive, fearing he may have something, drugs, weapon, etc. He asks him what he's doing. The kid pulls his hands out of his locker and is holding two small turtles. One time a kid twisted another kid's nipple as he raised his hand to answer a question. My wife is an elementary art teacher, which basically means constant stories. My favorite is from a time when kindergartners were playing with Play-Doh. Class was ending, and one little fella with a light speech impediment was just standing there, looking down. Wife checks to make sure he's okay. He turns around, showing the little Play-Doh snake he's holding to his crotch and says, "Look, I the whiner. TLDR, I the whiner." I was a student when this happened, but a friend accidentally said octopuses have 8 testicles instead of 8 tentacles when reading in a science class. The teacher was having a very hard time holding back laughter. I was teaching EFL to a class of primary school Thai kids. I was teaching them plurals by showing them a slideshow of cartoon monsters. It has 3 eyes. It has 4 legs etc. and getting them to tell me how many limbs and stuff each monster had. One little kid, 5 years old, got really into it and on one monster shoots his hand in the air and comes out with it has 1 dart anus. I was speechless for a second, so he jumped up on his chair, backwards, bends over and starts pointing to his ass shouting, "No teacher, anus. I tease anus." I believe my brother has posted about this before. Our aunt teaches kindergarten, so with 5-year-olds, in an unprivileged neighborhood, often, the kids are exposed to swearing and profanity at a young age. One time, she asked her students to sit crisscross applesauce and one kid wasn't paying attention. His friend next to him whispered, "Hey, crisscross applesauce mother ducker." Needless to say, my aunt couldn't contain her laughter and had to leave the room for a minute. toughest exchange I had as a college instructor was in one of my classes where people were conditionally admitted to the MBA program while waiting for their GMAT tests to be completed. I found the occasional student who had heard about an MBA, decided they wanted an MBA, but had no business being in grad school. Here's the most ridiculous exchange. Intro to computer science class. I usually spent a few moments going through a reminder of basic arithmetic skills. Me. So here is a standard formula we could put into a program. G equals -5 plus 2. Her. Hand up. Excuse me. What's that dash for? Me. What dash? Where? Her. The one before the 5. Class starts looking around. Me. That's a negative sign. Her. I've never heard of such a thing. Entire class is now looking at her. Me. I assure you. It exists. Worst grade on midterm. She never picked it up. One of my students who knew her told me she was pretty upset with me. I'm sure she was. There was a quote in Romeo and Juliet where Lord Capulet says to his wife, "Bring me my long sword." Ho. A ho is supposed to be an exclamation. But when the student read it, they read it as if it said "Bring me my long sword." Ho. And everyone started laughing. Not my story, but my little brother's. When he was in 1st grade, he told his teacher a joke. "Bro, why did Captain Hook die?" Teacher, "I don't know." "Why?" "Bro, because he wiped with the wrong hand." Apparently she had to step out of the room for several minutes so she wouldn't be seen laughing at his joke. I had a student who had extreme test anxiety. Every time we went to take a test he would throw up. After vomiting he would be fine. But he had to spew everywhere first for stress reduction or something. I would seat him next to the bathroom and provide a bucket. Now this worked on normal days, but during our state testing he would not be able to go to the restroom unless I first called an administrator to escort him. On the big testing day we practiced breathing techniques. I had a handy vomit bucket for him and we were ready to go. After 10 minutes he sure enough looked like he was going to be sick. Except he forgot about the bucket. He vomits and then tried to hold it in his mouth. He shoved his puke back in his mouth, swallowed and smiled at me and gave me a thumbs up. Horrified, yet simultaneously holding back laughter, I gave him wipes and a bunch of mints. The kid did great on the test in the end. I was a teacher's aide in a 3rd grade classroom. It was the last day of school before spring break and all the kids were so excited. It's a big party day. We had pizza, watched the Muppets movie, and all the kids brought gifts or dessert foods for everyone else. One kid who didn't have that much money wanted to make personalized bookmarks for the rest of the class. Because his family didn't have much money, he decided to look around his dad's workplace to find something he could use. In the trash can there were a bunch of long strips of cardboard. The only thing was the cardboard came from cigarette cartons and his dad worked at a liquor store. So on one side there was the kid's name and cute pictures. On the other was blatant advertising for Marlboro, Pall Mall, Camel, you name it. It was so hard to not laugh when he came up to me and excitedly showed them to me. This was my first time working in a classroom and I had no idea what to do. The teacher ended up having me take them to the supply room and laminate them with construction paper covering the other side. We told the kid it would help them last longer. His bookmarks were everyone's favorite gift. Mine still has the Al Capone logo on the back though. In about 8th grade, everybody in my class gathered in a Socratic seminar on the carpet. We read books on the ground, obviously the nerds in one area, jocks in another, and finally the cheerleaders. Now the queen bee of the cheerleaders was sitting in the middle along with a few others. Just about everyone but the queen had read the books and everyone knew it. So to punish her because of it, the teacher asked her to start off with the first question. She had absolutely had no idea what the book was about and started getting flustered. Just as the teacher was about to cut her off, she leaned back and dropped a gas bomb so lethal Al-Qaeda would be impressed. This was so powerful it caught her off guard and she just flipped over onto her back. An instant wet brown stain seeped through her yoga pants and petrified the rest of the class. When she finally realized just what had happened, she turned around and ran straight for the bathroom. Nobody saw her for a week after that. TLDR. A cheerleader shat herself so hard she flipped backwards. I was having a conversation with my manager and my year 2 student comes out of the classroom and says very seriously, "Can I poop?" My wife is a teacher and her and some of the staff were having a meeting inside a classroom. The door was closed and locked. A group of students were outside the classroom waiting for someone to come unlock the door so they can go on in and wait for the class to start. An impatient student started pounding on the door. She was unaware of the staff meeting going on inside. She was persistent with the knocking. So eventually one of the teachers came over and opened the door and let her and her only inside the room. He said, "Come on in, I guess." The entire staff looked at her in silence, then looked at each other while the student just awkwardly stood there with a horrified look on her face. They immediately went back to discussing their meeting. During that time, most of the staff were doing everything they could to keep from laughing. The poor girl continued to just stand there quietly, wide-eyed with a look of horror. Not me, but a friend of mine. My friend Emma. B is teaching and the kids are doing a worksheet without talking. Suddenly a kid stands up and pushes his books and things off the desk and turns to the girl to the right of him and says, "Nigger, you smell like hot dog water." I don't know how he kept a straight face. Student waiting late after rehearsal. Kid calls home. "Hey, can you tell mom to pick me up?" "Oh, she's in the shower. What about dad?" "He's in the shower too." Turns to teacher. "It's going to be a while, M. I taught English at a high school in Spain last year. We did a geography exercise where I would pronounce the English version of a country or body of water's name, and they would repeat it in unison. I came across the Aegean Sea, and I had no idea how to pronounce it. In my flustered confusion I tried, and said Aegean Sea, I think. And without hesitation everyone repeated Aegean Sea, I think. I lost it, and to this day I'm pretty sure they still don't know why. Not a teacher myself, but in high school I had this history teacher, Mr. Gress. He was a great teacher, witty, funny, genuinely loved history, didn't favor the preps and jocks like most of the other teachers, which was an absolute epidemic in my school. Being that we lived in a college town famous for its football team, didn't put up with it from anyone, etc. One day, one of the exceptionally ditzy cheerleaders asked him what the homework assignment was after he'd already repeated it several times. One of the stoner girls yelled out, "Oh my god, you dumb itch. He already said it 3 times. The whole class just died. He issued the standard "Okay, quiet down," but you could clearly see Mr. Gress stifling laughter. I was on break between periods, teaching a grade 8 class, 12-13-year-olds. The smallest girl in the class came up to my desk and said, "So and so hit me." I figured it was just inappropriate flirting and said, "Hit him back." She walked over, picked up a wooden stool and let him have a 2-arm swing that connected with the back of his head. He dropped. When he got up he looked at me. I said, "Don't hit girls." I think we all learned something that day. When I was a junior in high school, I rolled my snowmobile and was pretty banged up. Namely, my mid and lower back was all out of whack. I looked like Quasimodo walking around. One day, in my desktop publishing class, we were all working on something so it was totally silent save for mouse clicks and keyboard taps. I was in one of those plastic school chairs and moved a weird way. My lower back pelvis popped back into place loudly, and everything from mid-back down relaxed, including my asshole. I let out an insanely loud bra rap that echoed off the chair like most of you are aware they do. At the same time, my back felt so good that I let out a loud moan. Everyone froze. Next thing I know, my teacher bolts from her chair and out the door, where we could hear her screaming and laughing hysterically. Had a sub for my 8th grade class one day. Returned the next day to a scathing note from the sub about one of my students' abhorrent behavior. She actually used the word abhorrent. When I got to the bottom of it, here is what had happened. The sub was a fairly cute, younger woman. One of my male students had walked up to the sub and asked, "Hey Mrs. Subladdie, I lost my phone number, can I have yours?" That was it. I had to discipline the kid because of how offended the sub was, but I was holding back a chuckle the entire time. Edit. On another occasion we had to watch some lame school district mandated video and my entire class was clearly about to die from boredom. I had a big container of rubber bands at my desk, so I sat there during the film and shot them out into the class. Everyone was trying to contain themselves because they thought that one of their classmates was getting away with it. At one point I fired one off and it hit one of those aluminum louver deals that is attached to those long fluorescent lights. It made a loud ting sound and all of my students were about to bust up laughing. Full stop. Not a teacher, but in my kids' class when they were smaller, they used to do news, where each kid would tell the class about something interesting that happened. One of the teachers told me this. One little girl said, "I couldn't sleep last night, so I came back downstairs and mommy and daddy were sunbathing in front of the fire." There were fish tanks in our high school biology lab. A student pulled some brightly colored fish gravel out, dried it off, gave it to two of the popular girls and told them it was pop rocks. They tried to eat it, which obviously didn't go well, so they, of course, loudly complained to the teacher. When the teacher got involved, the instigator said, "Everyone knows we're not allowed to eat in the biology lab, so it's really their own fault for breaking the rules." That bio teacher did his best not to laugh and no one was punished. I'm obviously a student, not a teacher. I'm having a hard time thinking of one BC. Honestly, I will laugh at all the stupid things my students do. But here's one. In my physics class we were studying thermodynamics and I had my class making heat engines. We were working off a very loose definition that a heat engine is any device that uses heat energy to do work. Aka make something move. I had shown them a few examples, one of which was a balloon on top of a flask that expanded as the water in the flask turned to vapor. Their task was to design a heat engine of their own, different than the examples, and build it with what we had in the classroom or what they brought in. I'm still not sure how they got it by me. I suppose there were a lot of groups working at once. I like to think of my classroom as organized chaos. But one group decided that they were going to use the balloon flask idea, since they had to make it different than what I showed them. Instead of a balloon they used a condom. I don't want to think too hard, no pun intended, about how it got there. Did they bring it from home? Did someone already have it on hand? Did they grab it from the wellness center? But I'll let it slide, BC. Hey, it fit my rules. It wasn't until they were demonstrating to the class how it worked and we were watching a limp condom slowly erect that I thought, maybe we should have pulled out. TLDR. Creative kids get away with a steam-powered boner in class. One of my middle school teachers was taking attendance one day and said semen instead of Simon for one of the kids in the class. Guy laughed for about 5 minutes. While discussing a book wherein a girl has an affair with a dentist, a student raised his hand and said, "What do Kathy and cavities have in common? They both get filled by dentists." When the librarian was fussing around with an audio cable that wasn't working, a girl said, "Just pull it out, lick it, and stick it back in. That's what my boyfriend does and it works most of the time." I asked my class if anyone could define the word excruciating, and when no one raised their hand, a student said, "Thanks Obama, I love my job." I'm not a teacher, but I was talking to my English teacher about an assignment last year while he was marking a year 8 assignment. For the assignment the students were meant to make example propaganda from Nazi Germany, and one year 8 boy had written on a picture of a concentration camp, "Join the Nazis and you get free pyjamas." Safe to say she was in hysterics while telling me how she had to call his parents. Student wrote D instead of pennies. Right. Took my kids out on a lesson trip. We had to get a train somewhere, and one of my students is only 8 years old, so I'll let them go through the ticketed barrier with me. Yeah. He wasn't quick enough and the barrier smacked him in the face. I've never wanted to laugh so hard in my life. My boyfriend of the time had just broken up with me a week earlier. I was working in small groups with my first graders, and one decides to get fresh with me. "Miss Deem 9872. Do you have any kids?" "No. No I don't." Pause. "Because you're not married. Is that why?" Sure. Silas. "That's why." Another pause. "It's because no one wants to marry you, right?" Maybe it's because I was so emotionally unstable, or I actually had run out of emotion. But it took everything in me not to laugh till my sides hurt.